Won't these people ever stop? I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, it looks like the Trump administration is going to pursue a legal remedy to Obamacare and get it entirely stricken from the books.
Oh, my God.
Not just to take care of little aspects of it, but actually to try to eliminate it. And let me give you a little detail of this, and this comes from Politico, which Politico, by the way, couches this story in terms of saying that the Trump administration is going to do something that its own Attorney General and Director of Health and Human Services don't want to do. However, the Health and Human Services Director came out with a press release that said this is nonsense. The HHS Director's name is on the lawsuit and that he is not having any behind-the-scenes disagreements with others.
That sounds almost like shoddy reporting to me, which astonishes me.
Enough of the little tit-for-tat kind of battles going on inside or not. But here's the deal. The lawsuit from the Trump administration seeks to invalidate the entire Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, healthcare law. And I'm going to give you a quote from Politico. Monday's Justice Department letter to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit said federal lawyers would file a brief in support of a district court judge's finding that the individual mandate included in the Obama-era law is now invalid as a tax because the GOP Congress reduced the fine to $0 and the government cannot levy a tax of $0.
Exactly correct.
Run with it, my friend.
Well, first of all, I'm enormously pleased to hear this because, to be perfectly honest with you, I thought that ship had sailed and sunk. So just the fact that it's on the table makes me happy. I'll get to the why of that in a minute. Just on the specific question of the tax, we were told that it wasn't a tax. It eked through Congress. It had one vote, right, or something. It just barely scraped the reefs and got passed with the assertion that this wasn't a tax. A year or two later, whatever it was, John Roberts comes along and says, well, it is a tax. And instead of voiding the law, which is what he should have done because it was sold as a not a tax, once he said that it is a tax, the entire bill becomes essentially illegal, and he decided not to throw it out. Okay, John, whatever you want to do. I'm sure you've got your legacy all planned out in terms of your time on the court, but it seems pretty clear to me that if a law is passed under fraudulent circumstances and the Supreme Court rules that it was fraudulent circumstances, maybe it's time to chuck that law. And if they hadn't called it a penalty, if they had called it a tax, if they called it what it was, it never would have passed. They know it, I know it, you know it, everybody knows it. So I think the suit has got real grounds, and I need to see this happen because the Affordable Care Act was the most destructive thing that I've seen to Americans' individual freedoms, certainly in my lifetime. I think it's probably second or third after the 17th Amendment and maybe the 16th Amendment. It was a catastrophe. And the reason it's a catastrophe is very simple. This is for those of you out there who think that I'm saying no one should get any health care. All right. What I'm saying, what everybody who is on the side of this argument is saying, is that we do not want our lives in the hands of bureaucrats from the federal government determining whether or not our 4-year-old girl gets cancer treatment because it's not cost effective. Understand, it's really very simple. We have seen horrors in the National Health Service in Britain, two cases, but Charlie Guest is the one I know a little bit better. I want to recoup on this. I want to talk about this for a minute because it bears directly on the entire point of why this lawsuit is there. Here's a baby boy, a 4-year-old boy, I think he was, who had a very serious and rare condition. The National Health Service said, well, we can't do anything for him. I'm sorry. We just don't have the resources. And besides, it's not likely to work anyway. So here's your morphine pills. Take your kid home to die. Well, it turns out there were some doctors in the West where there's still a little bit of freedom who said, no, we might be able to save this guy. So the parents said, we would like our child, please, so that we can fly him to America. Other people are going to pay for the airfare. We're not asking the government to do it, and see if we can get him treatment. And they wouldn't let him go. And the reason they wouldn't let him go, Scott, is because the state had decided that that child had died, and so he was therefore going to die. No matter what the parents thought, no matter what the child thought, no matter what the doctor thought, that kid had been condemned to die by a review board of the National Health Service, and so sure enough, that's exactly what he did. I don't want to live under that. If I've got enough government control in my life already, the last thing I want is to have my personal survival and the survival of my family dependent on somebody making an on-the-spot decision based on whether or not I fit the certain guidelines according to the federal government, whether or not I'm worth living or dying or not. That's basically it. So I think this whole thing needs to be absolutely erased. And if Trump has any sense at all, and he certainly has some sense, I would be saying the reason we're doing this is to clear the way to completely restructure the healthcare system to make it like any other business. In other words, the Democrats want me to have 2 or 3 choices in my healthcare, but my frickin' car has 200 choices in its insurance. I can get whatever coverage I want. I can get whatever deductible I want. I can get whatever terms I want. I've got 15, 20, 30, 40 companies in a 2-mile radius competing for my money, trying to drive the cost down and the services up. And when one pill costs $20 billed to the insurance company, until you go after that, you are not going to make any headway at all. But
well, Bill,
all of this,
you put your finger on the big complaint here, and I think in a way you could argue that this just shows the incredible weakness of the Republican Party. You remember during several sequences of congressional elections how every Republican worth his salt was arguing that he needed to get elected so they could get in there and repeal Obamacare. When they got in there, they did not repeal Obamacare.
No,
now, in their weakened condition, they are trying to do through lawfare what they should have done through lawmaking or through legislation. And the complaint against the Republicans from inside and outside the party is you don't have an alternative plan. And so you are not only, some people think they couldn't have a plan, but a lot of people are just saying until you have a plan, you can't repeal this because you've got nothing to take its place. You've got a lot of people who are reliant upon it. And frankly, a lot of people like it.
Well, when you see a lot of people like it, I don't know how many people like it. There are a lot of people who told if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Turns out, no. You're going to lower your actual insurance premiums. Turns out they tripled. So I'm not sure how many people are completely in love with this plan as a general rule, but put that aside for a second. I agree with the premise. Absolutely, I agree with the premise. If you're going to repeal something, you should have a replacement plan, something in place, ready to go. But to say you can't do it until you have that is just plain wrong. I can arrest a disease before I start to cure the disease. And that's the way I look at it at this point. You know, if I can do anything to stop the spread of this disease, even though it's not making the patient better, the thing I want to do is to stop the damage from getting worse as quickly as possible. But to the degree that they're right, they're right and they're right. There should have been a plan. It should have been passed by legislation. All of that is absolutely true. Absolutely true. So what I'm saying is that this is a strategy to get rid of a law that was basically fraudulent and foisted on the American people with a full knowledge on the part of the people involved that it was fraudulent because it was in fact a tax. Now, I have yet to meet somebody who is more disappointed in those Republican Congresses than I am. And they deserve the full lion's share of the blame for this. Yeah, we'll elect me and we'll appeal Obamacare. Well, you've been elected. Now you have the Senate. Now you have the president. So go ahead and do it. Oh, well, I don't know. People may not like that too much. Out. Goodbye. See you later. So what's going to happen is what I think is appropriate to happen. They're going to try to do this through lawsuits. Okay. That means that the lawsuits are then going to pass through. Essentially, what's essentially happened is the legislative branch dropped the ball. The executive branch is now trying to punt it into the judicial branch. But I have some confidence that the judicial branch will handle this with a reasonable amount of impartiality and a sense of justice. It's not like we're talking about the Ninth Circuit Court, for God's sake. Right. So if it turns out the suit has legal grounds, then the suit will continue on, and presumably it'll end up in the Supreme Court. And that's when we find the value of Donald Trump more than anything, because of guys like Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. So, am I happy that this is the way it's being done? I'm not. But this law is the worst thing that's happened to the country since I've been alive. And if they can nail it down by any means necessary, I'm in favor of it.
It almost seems like a confession of weakness on the part of the Republicans, basically to say, not only do we think things aren't going to go well in the next congressional midterms in order to give us a majority so that we could actually do this legally or by lawmaking rather than the courts, But they're basically saying that even if we got a majority, we probably couldn't get it passed. So let's use the courts. And Bill, that's been your complaint against progressives and liberals for a long time, is that they accomplish through, essentially one vote of somebody in a black robe what they could not get done through 535 of their elected representatives.
So are we supposed to then, since their entire strategy has been to use the Supreme Court to negate legislation they don't like and to essentially legislate from the bench, make mandates about laws that were never even introduced as bills. So since that's the strategy that they're using, we decided, okay, so the Supreme Court's important, so now we have a majority on the Supreme Court. And if you're telling me that we have to abide by the same rules that we used to abide by when this country was more or less fair, I'm sorry, I'd love to believe that were true, but it's not. If they are able to do the damage that they've done through Lawfare, then we need to respond with Lawfare. And I'm all about congressional restraints, and you may have noticed that what I said was that this lawsuit would progress through the mechanism of the judicial branch of the country. So I'm not talking about anything extra constitutional. I'm not talking about anything that is outside of the purview of the government. I'm not going that far. But I am saying that if this is a legal pathway, constitutionally empowered, in order to make this abomination disappear, then I'm 100% in favor of it.
Making the case for liberty 5 days a week, Bill Whittle now brings you Bill's opinion on breaking news as it happens. We appreciate the members of BillWhittle.com who've made this show possible. They continue to contribute by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that Become a Member link. And they are not only engaged with us through that mechanism, but engaged with each other through the member blog and comments and other features on the new website. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. If you haven't joined yet, now's the time. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.